Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent 150. Bent, can you believe it was just 100 episodes ago that I made fun of the NFL for thinking that their fans wouldn't know what L meant in Roman numerals for Super Bowl 50?
Has it been that long?
It has been that long. It's been 100 episodes.
Nice.
In case you guys didn't know, L is Roman numeral for 50. This is episode CL, or 150. Roman numerals. Great stuff. Bent, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm pretty happy that I have not been, you know, shamed by the Klingon Empire for the alleged crimes that my father definitely didn't commit, but that another great house says that he did commit. And since, the Chancellor doesn't want to have some kind of civil war, he decides to side with those traitors over there instead of siding with me. And then if civil war happened anyway.
That sounds so familiar.
It does sound familiar. So, yes, in case you guys don't know, this is indeed based on the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Sins of the Father, for literally no other reason than that I needed a title. None of the titles for any of these mean anything other than I thought it was a clever title and an opportunity for a fun thumbnail. That's it. So, Fearmonger, Master of Science, who's been a member for 24 months and is at the tetrapod level, says NFL should take that L and give it to AIG with the AIG as a bag of dicks emoji, which means we'll take a drink for it. Ben, what are you drinking today? Looks like Baja Blast.
I'm drinking Mountain Dew Baja Blast.
Nice.
I'll show you the can.
Very cool.
There it is.
I am drinking a cucumber-infused gin and tonic. Earlier today, I muddled about half a cucumber into about, 12 ounces of gin. And I poured some of that into this. I let it sit for about, I think about 4 hours just on the counter. And then another, 2 hours in the refrigerator. And then I toss it in the freezer to get it nice and cold. So
that sounds pretty good.
Let's see. Rail got to Bella for $2 says CL means 150. I thought Dapper was just a 2NE1 fan. I don't even know what that is, so I don't think I'm that, but maybe. But also CL, yes, it means 150. All right, so we're not here to talk about Roman numerals or Star Trek, unfortunately, both of which would be pretty cool topics, but not the subject of Kent with Bent. Just a Peach 3, who's been a member for 31 months, is at the tetrapod level, says Godzilla can't get bent and AIG is a bag of dicks. So we take Adrian. Right, so instead, we were here to take a look at Kent Hovind and play a little bit of a drinking game as we do. Roshina Rock cut off some of it. Gotta go to another window. Give me a second. Roshina Rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for $1.99 says cucumber is a magical fruit. It is. Well, I mean, as much as any fruit is magical. I really do like cucumber, and it is a fruit. All right, so we're here to talk about Kent Hovind and his silly nonsense. Silly nonsense. Now, what this means is that we will be taking some drinks while we do that, and we'll go through the drinking rules right now. But before we do, I want to say, hey, if you don't want to play along with the drinking game, that's absolutely fine. Please don't if you don't want to. If you want to play along but you don't want to drink alcohol, you want to drink water, tea, juice, coffee, soda. If you want to drink
Blast.
Baja Blast, there you go. I feel like soda covered that, but probably not. If you want to take a hit off of a vape, if you want to clap, fist pump your buddy, whatever, all of that's fine. Play along in whatever way you want to. But if you do decide to play along with an intoxicating substance, please be careful, pace yourself, know your limits, and don't go overboard. We usually get to reasonably high drink numbers. Don't take shots of hard liquor. Take like a swig of beer, right? Or if you are drinking hard liquor, like a tiny little sip. Because, sometimes we get into like the 50s or 60s in terms of drinks. And if you're taking shots of liquor, you will die. Don't do it. That being said, also, do not play this game with an intoxicating substance and then go out, drive, fly an airplane, operate heavy machinery, or text your ex. Those are all bad ideas. They stay bad ideas when you're drinking. They become worse ideas, actually, when you're drinking. Don't do it. And if you do, or you do anything else that causes injury, grievous bodily harm, death, dismemberment, destruction of property, or anything like that, that's on you. You've been warned. This is a play at your own risk game. Now, with all that stuff out of the way, the actual rules. We will drink anytime Ken Hovind says something that's so stupid We just kind of have to, because we need to have brain coolant, because that's actually a pretty frequent one. We will also drink anytime Kent gets something that is actually factually correct that he states of his own volition without it just being a citation from someone else that he's reading. That doesn't mean he can't cite anyone else for it, but it actually has to be stored in his brain, and it has to be correct. We do tend to get a little bit more generous with that as time goes on if we haven't had too many of those drinks. But, so, you know. Oh yeah, no drinking and going shooting either, says Sable Eagle. Alcohol and ammunition are a bad mixture. It's true. Yeah, don't go shooting if you've been drinking. Yep. Also, don't shoot your Cybertruck in the mistaken impression that eighth-inch thick steel will stop a bullet. It won't. So I gotta try that. Yeah. And then, in his frustration, he threw his loaded gun on the ground, which is another big no-no. Don't do that either. Yeah, that was making the rounds on a few social media sites. I was just like, oh no. Anyway, we will also take a drink if Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land or tells a story that didn't happen. Now, the story that didn't happen is a little bit of a judgment call, but if it feels like it's something that would be posted on r/thathappened, probably going to take a drink for it. We'll also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind mentions those that political party or the members thereof or their policies. That political party being the one that was really popular in Germany in like the 1930s into the 40s. You know the one. The one that caused the Spanish-American War. That's the war, right? That I'm thinking of?
I'm not sure.
Okay. It might not have been the Spanish-American War. We'll double check. Get back to you. I'll have to ask some historians. Let's see. We will also take a drink if Kent Hovind mixes up what we can know about Australopithecus or any other wider taxon to which Lucy belongs with what we can know about Lucy just from her skeleton. We call that a ad hominid. If Kent cites a source and we check the source, and not only does it fail to support him, which it almost always will, but it actively contradicts him, we call that a Trojan source. We take a drink for that. We'll take a drink if either Bent or I can predict what he's about to say. And I think that's all the ones for Kent. Am I getting all the ones for Kent?
I think so.
Okay. We will also take a drink if anyone super chats anything to the effect that AIG, that's Answers in Genesis, are a bag of dicks, because they absolutely are. We will also take a drink if anyone manages to super chat or membership milestone chat any of the kaiju emoji, which we have just for channel members. Take a drink for that. We'll also take a drink for gifted memberships. Give 5 memberships, I take 5 drinks. Give 20, I take 20. Give 50, I'm probably just going to finish this drink and go get another one. So, we do have a drink counter, so you can keep track. And, yeah. And Roshina, rock-shaped like dill pickle, Keller said, for $1.99 says, so drink when Godwin's law is invoked. No. It is specifically not that. It is actually a bit broader than that. Godwin's law is when you compare your opponent to that in an argument in order to say that they're being bad people. In this case, all Kent has to do is mention them in any context. Doesn't even have to compare anyone to them. He can just be talking about them on their own without making any comparisons. Take a drink. He could even be right about what he's saying about them, right? So if he's like, you know, the leader of that political party was famously a vegetarian who hated smoking, doesn't matter, we'll still take a drink. That's factually accurate, so we might actually take 2 drinks. So yeah, it is not technically the Godwin's law. Drink, because of that wider scope. So, Bent, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, by way of a little bit of context, Kent Hovind is trying to explain Walt Brown's hydroplate hypothesis, which apparently, at least at this time, Kent was a big fan of and supported. And the hydroplate theory, if you can call it that, which you shouldn't, but you could, basically says that when the Earth was created, it was created miraculously with the granitic crust over a thick layer of ocean water. And then at the time of the flood, what actually happened was that the pillars that held up the granitic crust had begun to crumble, and so there was a catastrophic chain reaction in which once one crumbled and part of the crust came crashing down, that upset the stability of the whole thing, causing a rapid inversion of the relative densities where the granitic crust slams down onto whatever the basement rock is below that, presumably the mantle, I guess, forcing all that superheated water up. We did last time do a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation and figured out that it was going to release something at a hugely conservative minimum of like 10 to the 15th kilojoules or something like that, which is just an absurd amount of energy. Plenty to boil off, the oceans. Noah's not going to be okay after this. And that was basically just assuming a 100-meter thick ocean with the average mass of the crust held above it. So, like, yeah, not not okay. Not going to survive. Kent also was talking about how this would cause the continents to slide around, despite earlier in this very talk having talked about how he thought the position of the continents had never changed. So that's weird. Kind of odd that Kent thinks both of the continents didn't move, but also that they did move during the flood, which I don't know what to do with that. Roshina, rock shaped like dill pickle killer, for $4.99 says Kent still loves the hydroplate theory. In fact, he wants to raise funds to reprint Walt Brown's book. Why would he? What a weird thing to do. Kent is he's such a weirdo. Like, some of the things that he does, I understand why he does them, right? Like, I get it. But some of the stuff like that, I'm just like, what could you possibly hope to accomplish? Like, back when he was trying to get the president to pardon him, and I was like, you've already served your sentence. It's not going to, like, get rid of that. You've already had all the ownerships to all your properties transferred. They're not going to undo that. And it would also require that you admit guilt, which you don't do, Kent. So what? It was just, yeah, or like that time that he tried to sue Eric in Sovereign Citizen Court, and Eric just ignored it. Because here's what that actually is. It's just a request for arbitration. And arbitration can be legally binding. Like, for instance, if Bent and I had a dispute and we wanted to take it to court, but neither of us really wanted to go through the extreme, like, lengthiness of a court case, I could say, well, okay, what if we both sign a contract to bind us to a third-party arbitration, and we both together select an arbitrator? Then that person decides the dispute between us. That's legally binding now. So if, say, I renege on that agreement after I decide that the arbiter didn't do what I wanted them to, Bent can take that contract into court and have it enforced. Right? So if someone sues you in a sovereign citizen court and you agree to be bound by that decision, then that's perfectly valid. And you might do that because you think this person has a reasonable chance of actually bringing it to a real court and suing you there, and you don't want to have to deal with that hassle. So you just say, all right, fine, we'll go to the arbiter. Also, a lot of contracts you sign, like end-user license agreements, have arbitration clauses. But what doesn't work is if you just send someone paperwork saying that you've been sued in a not a real court, in an arbitration court, and now you have to respond. No, you don't. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but yeah, that's not a real court. You don't have to agree to it. Unlike real courts, where they can force you. Anyway, Bent, we're going to hit play, and remember that is the context, and Kent's talking about how the hydroplate theory would cause plates to buckle up and bulge out and down and whatever. Rushina, rock-shaped like dill pickle Keller for $4.99 says, one more Kent update. He's trying to build in the process of building a third-scale Noah's Ark because no one else has done it correctly yet. Oh, no. What does Kent think the problem is with the Ark Encounter arc? What? Kent, I feel like maybe he'll succeed. Maybe he'll. I'm wrong, but I feel like the fact that someone else has already built a full-scale Noah's Ark means that probably most people aren't interested in you building a third-scale Noah's Ark, Kent. But hey, you know what? People are crazy. That land he's on was donated to him by some idiot. And I say that because you have to be an idiot to donate land to Kent Hovind. Like, the most abusive piece of shit on the planet. That's not true, but he's up there.
So it doesn't kill the people inside.
Oh yeah, his example was Car Crumple Zone.
And that they try to use all that stuff. But he says the Earth's crust slid off, causing the basalt to lift up in the center even more, until eventually all factors are equalized, the stresses are neutralized, and everything stops. Some of the water is probably still trapped down there. Huge areas of under-subterranean water in the...
So the problem with this is that we would know, right? There's this thing called seismology. Seismology is related to things like seismic events, like earthquakes and what. It's studying the vibrations in the earth. And you can tell if there are significant, like, density discontinuities and things like that by the ways that different kinds of waves in the earth travel. Right? We have S waves and P waves, which one of them goes side to side, the other one goes up and down. And they're both deflected by different kinds of things. It's how we know that there is a liquid core and a solid core under that. It's how we know how thick the mantle is. It's how we know how thick the crust is. Oh, drink from Mothra. Which is one I didn't mention, which is that if Mothra comes by, or Godzilla comes by, audibly, we take a drink. So, if there were a big ocean of water under the ground, some seismic waves would pass through it pretty much every time there's an earthquake, or at least a good portion of the time that there's an earthquake, and there would be a noticeable anomaly. No one has ever detected that anomaly, so we have good reason to say that no, there is no remaining subterranean ocean from this. Savage Cobra for $9.99 says, an arc made by Kent Hovind would be much less seaworthy than the Genesis one, and it's a death trap. Oh yeah, I mean, Kent... It's very clear that Kent neither knows about nor really cares about anything like building codes and like fire safety and stuff like that. His entire campground is basically just like a death trap. It's like made by like your uncle who did well in like woodshop, but then has never done carpentry ever since. And he's like, I'm going to build a whole town. And you're like, okay, Uncle Buck, go for it. And then it just is like a facade and starts falling over the minute you go over there. Like, you shouldn't go there. You shouldn't stay in the building. It's not safe. In fact, he has a release specifically because it's not safe and he can't get it insured or won't get it insured. I'm sure he could, but it would probably cost huge amounts of money because of how dangerous it is. And then Josh Wiggies has gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you very much. So let's take 5 drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Here we go.
Crust of the earth. It still is today. Okay, called aquifers.
Aquifers are not under the crust of the earth. They're in the crust of the earth. They're relatively small pockets. They're not oceans. And also, they're not like a solid chunk of water. They're interspersed through cracks in the rock. Right? If you dig into an aquifer, you don't find a big open pool. You find rock suffused with water. You can't collapse the crust onto that because it's still mostly rock. Like, it is... I'm sorry. It's hard for me to fathom the degree to which Kent has no clue what he's talking about everything. Like, at some point, you'd think that he would figure something out. Right? But no, he can manage to misunderstand almost anything. Okay, sure.
As the basalt cracked, the water would rush in to the cracks. Now, if you...
I mean, given that it's become a plasma because of how much thermal energy you've output, no, it probably wouldn't, but sure, whatever.
Take a magnet and stick it in an oven and heat it up.
Yeah.
If it's not oriented north-south, it'll gradually lose its magnetic strength.
Yeah.
A hot magnet...
Actually, it'll lose its magnetic strength either way because the thermal energy of you, like, melting a magnet is going to be, like, the Brownian motion from that is going to be way stronger than the magnetic field of the Earth. So, like, it'll recrystallize and it'll be weakly aligned to the magnetic field of the Earth. But it's not going to gain in strength over, like, an artificial magnet, which you can create by doing something similar, except letting it cool in a strong magnetic field. So, yeah, if you want to make your own permanent magnet, make an electromagnet, melt it in that, and have that field strength be pretty high. And then when it crystallizes, it'll be strongly magnetized in the direction of the magnetic field that it cooled in. So, there you go. There's a way to make a magnet. Now, that's super dangerous, so, like, don't do that at home. Don't do that. But yeah, that is a way that you could make a magnet. Erosion, a rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for $4.99 says, AIG is a bag of Kent's favorite part of barnacle anatomy. Nice, we'll take a drink. Oops, I definitely made a mistake there. Sorry about that. We did not get to 779%.
Oh, shucks.
I know, that would be pretty cool. You would have gotten free pizza. So we'll take 2 drinks. One is for Roshna's super chat, and the other one is for Dapper Zipper. All right, there's 2. We're at 13% of the way to both a fancy avatar and Bent getting free pizza because they're the same number today.
It will not store it won't be very strong. A cold magnet will be stronger. It'll store the magnetic field better.
I mean, okay, look, I guess to some degree, but like if you're storing things at normal, like average temperatures that you come across in your everyday life, it's really not going to make much of a difference. Like, you don't need to store your refrigerator magnets in the freezer in order to extend their life. Like, whatever. It's really not going to be a big deal. But I guess that's not technically wrong. It's just weird because, like, yeah, you're going to need like an oven or like a crucible to really make much of a difference in any reasonable amount of time. But whatever.
So here's water rushing into the cracks of hot basalt. That's going to cool it off, right?
Yeah.
That's going to store a strong magnetic signature.
Not. Oh. Not any stronger than the field strength that's around already, which won't. Why would it be affected by this, like, density inversion? The magnetic field, no matter how it comes about, which can't. I don't. As far as I know, we don't have a great model of how it comes about, but no matter how it comes about down towards the core, not in the crust. So if the crust is composed of a layer of water and a layer of, like, granite over a layer of basalt, none of that has anything to do with the magnetic strength of the magnetic field, and you can't get a magnetic strength that's stronger than the ambient field. It doesn't matter that much how fast you quench it. Like, no, this is no.
In the rock. Areas where the basalt is still hot, it's going to have a weaker magnetic signature. So when they're measuring the magnetic signature on the bottom of the ocean floor, they were not measuring magnetic reversals. They were really measuring where the cracks are.
Yeah, which would be fine, except that they were measuring reversals. Right? Because Kent is portraying this as like, well, there's a sine wave, and it goes above 1 in the whole, or 0, sorry, the whole way around, right? So it's always the same directionality. Except that that's not true. The directionality of a magnetic field is very easy to determine, right? Like, if you have any device that can measure the strength of a field at all, it will react in opposite directions to oppositely polarized magnetic fields. Of necessity. And so, if the direction flips, guess what? It's not centered around some number that's high enough that it never reverses. It does in fact reverse. So Kent is just lying to us. And also, I was willing to ignore the fact that there's enough heat release to basically make all of this water into plasma, at more likely, and at the very least steam. So no, Kent, you don't have water to sink into these cracks. So even if your mechanism worked, it doesn't match the data we have, and we know your mechanism can't work because there wouldn't be any water. It would just boil. Because remember, hydroplate theory actually has a worse heat problem than catastrophic plate tectonics. A significantly worse heat problem. And catastrophic plate tectonics already releases enough heat to vaporize not the water, but the crust of the Earth. When Kent's sitting here looking like, oh, 578C versus 700C, no, we're looking at more like 6,000 or 7,000 C as reasonable temperatures for this event. 1,000. So once again, orders of magnitude. Creationists just can't figure them out.
Which are now full of sediment. You know, they filled in with stuff. They've been there for 4,400 years. So you can't actually see most of the cracks down there.
Well, then when they were drilled up, they'd be obviously sedimentary rock and not basalt, Kent. Do you not think geologists can tell the difference? What? Take another drink for this.
I honestly think that's the nail on the head. I don't think he thinks that geologists can tell the difference.
Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he just thinks that geologists are just complete idiots.
But you can detect them with the magnetic signature.
Do you think Kent knows how a magnetometer of any kind works? Like, do you think he could explain the mechanism? Yeah.
No way.
No. I agree. Because you're not going to use a magnetometer that can't detect the directionality of the field, right? Because one of the things is, unlike, say, temperature, right, which is a scalar field, there's no directionality to it, right? It's not like it's going to be 50 degrees to the left in temperature. Like, that doesn't mean anything, right? But like gravity, and like gravity, there's a scalar, or sorry, not a scalar, there's a vector associated with magnetic fields, right? So when you say that the strength of Earth's magnetic field results in, gravitational field, results in a acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared, roughly, on average, there's a direction for that, right? It's not 9.8 meters per second squared in any direction. It's down, specifically. Any point on Earth, you can figure out which way is the direction of the gravitational field. Similarly, magnetic fields have an orientation. You can be aligned with the north-south axis. You can be facing north or south. You can be misaligned by some number of degrees. And so, if you're going to have a magnetometer to determine things like direction, you're going to have one that can return to you the vector of the magnetic field. Because magnetic fields are vector fields. That's an important thing about them. Florida Luminous Pooh for $5 says, when I meet a lovely lady, for the first thing I'm looking at is her heart. It's not my fault her testicles are in the way. Thank you. That is... Now you know, ladies, just trying to stare at your heart using X-ray vision. Which, by the way, that's what X-ray vision would actually be like. It's not like the Superman cartoons where, like, he can see through a wall into, like, or through clothes or something. It's like, no, you would be seeing people's bones and, like, imprints of their organs. And also, if you could see that much via X-rays, your eyes must be projecting X-rays, which means you're basically exposing everyone to ionizing radiation every time you look at them. Turns out that if Superman would be real, it's way worse than you think it would. Yeah, that's why evil Superman is like a trope. Like, The Boys is basically just about an evil Superman. Movie Brightburn was about an evil Superman. Yeah, that's probably more likely what would actually happen if there was a Superman.
That's all it is. It's not a magnetic reversal.
Except the directionality switches can. That's the thing. And if you want to say it doesn't, okay, great, but you're going to have to actually find errors with the studies that says it is, or do your own study and publish your results and your methods so that other people can reproduce your study, finding the opposite. You just saying, nuh-uh, isn't an argument. Nuh-uh doesn't mean anything other than I don't agree with you, which we already knew, but it doesn't add anything to the conversation. Like, if I say, it doesn't really matter, right? If I make an argument, Ben disagrees with me, and I say, well, you're wrong, and walk away, that probably is not going to change Ben's mind. I haven't given him any reason to. That's why when, say, that time, well, those times that we were talking about, say, evolution and the age of the Earth, you know, the reason that Bent isn't a young Earth creationist anymore, I gave reasons for my arguments. I didn't just say, yeah, well, I mean, you're a stupid creationist and walk away. That probably wouldn't have worked.
Absolutely not.
Here's that picture we were looking for earlier of what they, on the left is what they actually find. Brown areas would be strong magnetic field. White areas is weak magnetic field.
Is that the picture you were already showing us, Kent? Because, I mean, I looked at the source on that, and it said CSE. That's Creation Science Evangelism. That's just Kent's own picture. It's not a citation to something that we can double check. That's just Kent saying, this is what I think it is. But Kent, you're wrong, because all the studies say you're wrong, and you don't have any counter citations except yourself. And I guess maybe Walt Brown, but here's the thing, not even other creationists think that Walt Brown is right about this. Basically, everyone but Walt Brown and Kent Hovind and maybe Carl Baugh have abandoned hydroplate theory. Because one, it makes the flood inevitable, not the consequence of human sin. And two, it has even worse problems with heat and other physics than catastrophic plate tectonics, which already has a giant heat problem and is physically impossible unless you just change the thermal conductivity of the Earth's crust. Which, you know, you can't really do. That's not how physics works. And yet, it's still far less unreasonable than hydroplate. No one takes hydroplate seriously. Well, okay, sometimes Donnie Deals does, but that's only when he thinks that it's currently a more defensible position against a particular objection right in front of his face now. Other times, he accepts catastrophic plate tectonics, because here's one of the things about standing for truth, Donnie Bodinsky. He doesn't actually have positions. he has an identity that he has to defend, and he will do that with mutually contradictory explanations for things as long as it seems like a good idea in that moment. He has zero consistency. He doesn't actually believe anything. He will have on guests that say completely opposite things on subsequent days and just agree with everything they say while they're saying it. Why? Because what they're not doing is challenging his identity. He doesn't care about facts, just cares about identity politics. In particular, his identity as an evangelical, conservative Christian.
By the time it gets in your textbooks, it's nice, neat lines, okay? It's not actually nice, neat lines that they find down there.
Yeah, that's true, Kent. You simplify things for diagrams, but hey, it's true, we'll take a drink for it.
It's kind of a jumbled up mess. So as basalt gets hot, it loses its magnetism. So I think the water rushed into the cracks, cooled the basalt, and locked in a stronger magnetic signature.
Okay, but you just said that as it gets hot, it loses its magnetism? So that would have locked in a weaker signature. So you're contradicting yourself. In fact, it has to start forming crystals for the alignment to take place. And if you cool something fast enough that it can't form crystals, it forms as an amorphous solid. And in that case, there's not going to be any alignment. In fact, the difference between ice, like you normally get in your freezer, and amorphous ice, which is what you get if you, say, plunge water into liquid nitrogen, is specifically the lack of crystal formation. That's why if you freeze water as amorphous ice, and you say shatter it, it's not going to have any shattering. It's not going to have like planes that it shatters along. It's also not going to form jagged little crystals, which is why it's the best way to freeze those otter pops. Because it doesn't freeze into jagged crystals. It all freezes in place. Great stuff. Also, liquid nitrogen is dangerous, so I don't know. Maybe don't just use it as part of your kitchenware. Although apparently it's very cheap. Apparently it's like cheaper per volume than milk is. Like, you can just get liquid nitrogen if you want.
There's a lot of nitrogen in here.
Yeah, it turns out it is pretty easy to get. It's true. Like, look, I just got a whole bunch of nitrogen. Not all nitrogen, but mostly nitrogen.
There is no place on the ocean floor where a north-seeking compass will point south.
Do you have a citation for that, Kent? Other than your own ministry? But also, I mean, all of that would require is that, that just means that the Earth's magnetic field is stronger than the magnetic field from the rocks. Which is why if you actually wanted to test this, you would do it in a, chamber that's not... By a chamber, I don't necessarily mean like a whole room, but it can be a small test chamber. But one that's magnetically isolated. That's actually pretty easy to do. All you need to do is put it in a box where the material the box is made of is highly magnetically conductive, which will mean that the magnetic flux lines flow preferentially through the box and not through anything inside the box. Magnetic shielding is actually pretty easy to make. People make it all the time. I actually found a magnetic shielding case for your Wi-Fi router in case you're worried about your Wi-Fi signal giving you cancer or whatever. Of course, the problem is that you know what happens if you magnetically shield your Wi-Fi router?
I imagine you don't get a signal.
No, you do not get a signal. It can't escape the shielding. So it's true, it won't affect you biologically. It just also will no longer function as a Wi-Fi router. So I'd suggest not doing one of those. If that's what you're worried about, just get rid of your Wi-Fi router. Just use wired internet.
The Earth today has cracks all over it. The San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, the New Madrid Fault. None of my fault, but no question the Earth has cracks. The question is, how did they get there? A couple of weeks ago, I was staying at somebody's house in Denver area, Colorado, and they said, yeah, right off our front yard is the Golden Fault. And you can see where the...
Tremo Mathkey says, magnetic shielding equals Faraday cage. So they're similar in terms of the basic idea, but the importance with magnetic shielding is that you have a low resistance to magnetic lines of force, which is not the same thing as having a low electrical conductivity. Sorry, a high conductivity, a low resistance. So it's different materials are better at electrical shielding versus a Faraday, which just shields from electromagnetic radiation overall. Because you're going to want to make that out of just pretty much any kind of highly conductive material for electricity, whereas that does not necessarily going to just block magnetic lines of force. Because different materials have different levels of conductivity versus just general electromagnetic, like force carrying or charged particles versus the actual magnet. So, yeah. And I don't know exactly which materials to make magnetic shielding out of, but I do know that you can make them, and they do in fact work. And we did drink for the joke that didn't land, says Mayan Finisher. He says, joke that didn't land, we drank for it. At least I drank for it. Pretty sure I incremented the drink counter.
I drink, yeah.
The ground had slipped down. Maybe, I don't know, 70 feet. Just a cliff. That was one of the fault lines of the Earth. I stood right on top of the San Andreas Fault in Lompoc, California. That's the weirdest feeling. You know, you're driving along, and all of a sudden it goes this little mountain range. You know, you go up the mountains and come back down, and you realize you're in the middle of a valley. A little sign, San Andreas Fault. You drive another quarter mile, and you're out of it again.
Yeah.
Well, when I was in Alaska, Mom and I stayed in the...
Is he just going to keep listing faults that he's seen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. I guess that's a thing you could do, Kent. I don't know what point it's making, but sure.
12th or 13th or 14th floor, I forget, of this motel that was built 30 feet away from the San Andreas Fault. They don't call it that up there. It's got a different name, but it's the same crack in the Earth, okay? They said in 1964, the Earth dropped down about 30 feet. And so they smoothed it out and planted grass. And we looked out the window, and there was the grassy slope. We could see it. I mean, from here to the burn barrel, away from us.
Goop23 for $2 says, only time Kenneth can say something isn't his fault. Oh. Yeah, a lot of what's happened in his life is completely his fault. Like his divorce, the fact that neither of the kids he likes wants to talk to him, and the fact that I presume the kid he doesn't like that still doesn't want to talk to him anymore after how he was treated. His time in prison. Basically, the only thing that's happened to him, I can say is probably not his fault, is that he got off of the mail fraud charges that were brought against him while he was in prison. And the way that happened was jury nullification. One of the people on the jury was secretly a Kent Hovind fan. Decided not to vote no matter what. Or not undict, sorry, to vote guilty no matter what. And the prosecutors declined to retry the case after the hung. They just dropped the charges. So that's one of the few things that I can say. They probably didn't arrange for that. It was probably just a jury member lying to the judge about reasons they couldn't be impartial. Which, by the way, if you decide to do that, that's perjury. Answering questions from a judge during jury selection is done under oath. So, you know, lie at your own risk. Olivia Williams, who's been a member for 30 months, is at the tetrapod level, says, we'll drop this before I leave, Ghidorah, and we'll take a drink for that, Ghidorah. Thank you very much. All right, here we go.
You're just right there. Here I'm up on the, 12th or 13th floor thinking, boy, if there's another earthquake, that's a long ways to fall down there, you know. So I asked the guys at the hotel. They said, oh, yeah, this hotel is built on big rollers. The whole building can move in case of an earthquake.
Okay.
The ground is going to move. They're going to hope the hotel moves less than the ground, so it kind of absorbs the shock, you know.
That's actually a pretty common technique for earthquake-proofing buildings, but I just don't know what the point is.
Well, if there's several kinds of faults, okay, there's a slip fault where one slips past the other like this.
Mm-hmm. Take a drink.
If you take two blocks of hard jello, smack them into each other, and start moving one down and one up while they're tight against each other. Eventually, you'll hear it go as the jello kind of jerks past itself, okay? Or take 2 blocks of wood. You can see the same effect. You know, you start putting pressure on, pulling them apart, pretty soon it'll have to jerk to equalize the pressure. It's that jerking that causes everything to shake.
These are really weird examples, but he's not wrong. I just don't see how this helps with magnetic reversals.
If they were just sliding smoothly, there wouldn't be a problem. You wouldn't have any earthquakes. But they're not sliding smoothly.
And yeah, no, Jello doesn't actually do that. But whatever, I don't care.
They will build up stress for years, 100 years, 200 years, whoever knows how long, and then all of a sudden, a jerk.
Joshua Geese for $5 says, would Kent consider those holy rollers? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe.
Works. The ground might actually only move a few inches. But the jerking, I mean, if I put a steel rod against your head and just tap it with a hammer and only move it a quarter inch, bam, it's still going to hurt, right? It's that jerking of the ground all of a sudden moving to relieve the stress that causes everything to fall down.
You ever notice how quickly Kent's analogies move towards injuring other people or harming animals?
I was just thinking about that. Like, why is he like this?
I suspect Kent is actually a sadist. I think he likes causing pain. I mean, think back to how much glee he had when telling the story about beating the crap out of Eric. It's not great. Sean for $20 says, the point is for Kent to say as many smart-sounding things as possible so that people will assume he's smart and that he knows what he's talking about. Or did they forget what he was supposed to be saying with a Godzilla? And we'll take a drink for that Godzilla, even though it didn't kind of work. I suspect you're on a phone, because they almost never work for people on phones. Here's a drink. And yeah, that is actually a pretty good explanation. That does seem to be a distinct possibility here. And then, Roshina Jerkin Jello Keller, oh no. For $1.99 says Kent loves his violence analogies. He really does. It's creepy, man. Like, I don't know. I feel like my analogies do not that quickly just go towards violence against others. My analogies often go to food. I would have a lot of food analogies. What can I say? I'm a hungry dinosaur. There's snacks on my wish list. Feel free to get some for me.
That's what an earthquake is. There's also the type of earthquake where there's a strike fault and a slip fault. Sometimes it slips down, sometimes it slips sideways. Sometimes it opens up.
Mm-hmm.
And you drop right inside. Well, if you're standing there, right.
Okay, Kent, and how does this relate at all? Brennan, I don't sell literal snake oil herring, who's been a member for 16 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, okay, Andawa ya frumabauaste sind. I don't know what language we're going for there, and I'm hoping that I was okay, because that's... Yeah, that's not a word. Come on. What language is that supposed to be? Let me know. But we'll take a drink for it, because I'm pretty sure I know what. Especially with the AIG's a bag of dicks emoji. Master Review for $4.99 says, I forgot the stream was at 7. Evidently the D in DST stands for the organ which AIG is a bag of. We'll take a drink for that. Yeah, so in case you guys don't know, both Brent and myself are living in Arizona, which does not observe daylight savings time, which means that while you all changed your clocks, I did not. Oh, and it's Gothic. Okay, so you're telling me that Rvia is an actual word in Gothic? There's no, like, extra vowels in there that I'm not... Damn you, Gothic. Let's see. My Unfinished Journey, who's been a member for 20 months and is at the amniote level, says, Ken says a lot of things that are correct and a lot of things that support his position. Unfortunately for him, there's not much overlap. That's true. Pretty much all the things he says that are correct are all things that do not support him. Like much of the stuff he's saying right now. Okay. Also, before we get back into Ken, I am noticing that we have 112 people watching, but only 52 of you have hit like, which means that unfortunately, I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. So hit like so you don't get bilboed. Because you just got bilboed. Harsh, I know.
Picture here shows the crust of the Earth being subducted. Now, when we went out to Hawaii and watched the volcanoes,
which aren't the result of subduction, that's a magma plume from under the mantle. But okay, Kent.
Preaching there in Hawaii, so I went to see a couple of volcanoes. As the lava flows, here's this river of melted rock.
Hmm?
The surface cools off. It's in contact with the air. And it gets a skin on there, like when you're cooking gravy, you know, you get the skin on your gravy. That surface, once in a while, will
I wish he dived in to see how the water in that lava river.
fall down inside the hot rock and get remelted. The surface of the lava can do all sorts of crazy things. You know, it can crack and move around and slide around because it's kind of floating on top of this, you know, liquid rock underneath.
Hmm?
The theory is that the surface of the Earth, the crust of the Earth, is floating on a hot magma core.
Okay, I'm going to take a drink. Wrong. The crust of the Earth is sitting on the mantle. The mantle is not a liquid. It does flow over a very long time, but it is not flowing magma like you might see in Hawaii. It is primarily what is essentially solid rock. If you were to hold a chunk of it, it would be solid rock. You could chip it, you could crack it in half, you could shatter it. It is only on extremely long timescales that it flows at all. Now, the mantle sits on top of the liquid core, which you could more reasonably term magma. But the mantle itself is not liquid magma. Magma primarily forms in most volcanoes because the less dense crust of the Earth, which has a lower melting point than most of the mantle, has subducted and is now molten because it is not made of the same stuff as the mantle. And then that produces upward pressure under the crust that it has subducted under, which then pushes up the lava, or well, pushes up the magma, which becomes lava. However, the magma and lava in Hawaii is actually a result of a plume where liquid hot magma is actually pushing through the mantle. And you can see the trail that the Pacific Plate has covered as it went over this plume as you trace back seamounts that go all the way back up to Siberia, where they result in Siberia in the Siberian Traps, which was a flood basalt that happened a really long time ago and caused a mass extinction. And then it started to die out as the majority of that plume went away. But still now, hundreds of millions of years later, it's still forming volcanoes, just not nearly as catastrophically. So no, Kent is wrong about basically all of this. Except, I guess, that subduction is a thing that happens. Roshna Dark Jello Keller for $1.99. Sorry, Jerkin Jello for $1.99 says, "This makes me want to watch The Core again." Oh, that was a weird movie. It was. Who made that? Who was the director on that? It feels like it would have been a Roland Emmerich thing, but I don't think it was.
Probably true. I don't argue with that. I don't know that it's true, but it's probably true. And they're saying the surface of the Earth.
You can't just say he doesn't know if subduction is real, or if the crust is like floating. Like, Kent, these are very basic aspects of geology that you could just check on. You could just read the papers. Whatever.
Earth is being pulled under in certain places. So at the mid-Atlantic ridge, it's coming up and moving out, and then it's being areas of subduction where one is sliding under another.
Yes, those
this
are both
could
things.
very well be true. I'm not arguing with it. But the theory, why this is so important, is what I want you to see. This is so
I've been waiting.
important to save the evolution theory, okay?
Okay, hold on. Taking another drink. Biological evolution has been the one and only theory of biodiversity in biology for far longer than plate tectonics has even existed. There is no way in which plate tectonics was created to rescue the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution was doing just fine back when everyone thought that the continents were fixed. So Kent is just making this up as a motive for creating plate tectonics as an idea. It is in no way a rescue mechanism for evolution. That was not what motivated it. If it were to go away completely, that would leave evolution more or less intact. I mean, it would make biogeography a little bit harder to explain, but like, that's about it. It wouldn't do anything to mutation, natural selection, sexual selection, kin selection, genetic drift, niche construction, any of these things. It wouldn't do anything to any of them. So, yeah. That's just Kent basically coming up with... Well, so Kent, what he's doing is something that's actually pretty common with creationists, which is he's basically just imagining that a large portion of what goes on in the scientific community are attempts to quote-unquote save evolution, which is basically never what happens. People aren't out there trying to offer evidence for evolution per se, any more than they're trying to offer like evidence for the globe Earth. We're past that, right? No one's out there trying to offer evidence for the oxygen theory of fire, or the germ theory of disease, or universal gravitation. None of these are things that we still need to find evidence for. That part of the investigation has already sailed. We are now happy to just say that, yep, these things are broadly correct, and go from there. If you disagree with any of them, the onus is on you to show that they're not broadly correct. Good luck with that.
The continents, as it rains, like last night when it rained, some of the dirt washed out of my yard. Which way did it go?
Downhill, presumably.
Toward the ocean, right? Eventually it's going to end up in the ocean.
I mean, there are basins where there's no drainage to the ocean. Most of Utah is in one of them. That's why the pollution is so bad there. It's also why the Great Salt Lake is there. But in most places, yes, towards the ocean is usually downhill.
Every time there's a rainstorm, or a landslide, or a mudslide, or ground creep, or mass wasting, or any of those things, the ground always falls down. Never goes up, right?
Thanks for figuring out gravity, Kent. I'm taking a drink. Technically, he's correct, and also it's stupid enough that I have to take a drink.
Eventually, all of the mountains are going to erode and wash and fill in the oceans.
Yeah, if mountains didn't grow, then sure. But mountains grow. They don't just erode; they also grow. This year, Mount Everest, higher than it's ever been, ever. The highest it's ever been is right now, and it will be even higher next year, and higher the year after that, and higher the year after that. Does that mean that erosion isn't happening to the Himalayas? Of course it is. It's just that the mountain building, or orogeny, is still ongoing, and it's happening faster when the mountains are eroding. Orogeny is just what it means to have a mountain building event. And they happen all the time. They're happening right now. Right now, there are ongoing orogenies in different places on Earth. The Hawaii, like the smaller islands in Hawaii, they're getting bigger. Well, the ones to the south are. Right? To the north, they're eroding away. So there are mountains in Hawaii that are getting bigger right now, and mountains in Hawaii that are getting smaller right now. The Himalayas are famously growing fairly rapidly. There are currently active volcanoes that are getting taller and taller. Now, eventually, maybe they'll blow up and shed a whole bunch of that height. But until they do that, they're getting taller. So no, it is not the case that we're in a situation where all the mountains currently around are only going to get smaller and wash away into the ocean. Orogenies begin, they have a long life, and then they end, and then those mountains start eroding away. But new mountains will start up. He's already listed one of the ways in which that can happen. The entire idea of subduction results in orogenies, volcanic orogenies. When plates collide and buckle up, which is something else he described earlier, that can result in folded mountains, which is another kind of orogeny, which you can see in the Himalayas. It's also the kind of orogeny that resulted in the Appalachian Mountains, which are the same mountains as the Atlas Mountains in Africa, as well as the Scottish Highlands. Those were all part of the same orogeny that pushed up mountains. So no, Kent, not all the mountains are going to erode down to the sea, because there's more than one process. Like, literally, it's the same thing as when a flat earther says, well, how can gravity be weak enough or strong enough to hold down the whole ocean, but weak enough that butterflies can ignore it? As if lift isn't a thing. As if you don't have to sum the forces, and as if some forces can't sometimes be stronger than the force of gravity. in certain circumstances. Seriously, the longer I do this, the more I realize just how much like flat earthers creationists are. There's virtually no difference. Their ideas are just more popular because they're more central to more people's identities. That's it. It really just does come down to identity politics.
That's inevitable. When I was in California, one of my students brought me this chunk of polished rock. It was about yay big and about an inch thick, and it was really beautiful rock. I mean, I had quite a rock collection there, and the kids knew I liked rocks, so they brought me this gorgeous chunk of rock, and I said, "What is this?" He said, "You're not going to believe it." I said, "Well, tell me. I've never seen anything like this. Sort of like a granite, only just really bright, beautiful colors. I mean, blue and everything else in this rock." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, my dad's company sends people out into the Pacific Ocean, and they've got this big machine that blows water down and blows all the dust away on the ocean floor and gets down to solid rock. Then they saw pieces of the rock out. And they
So it's oceanic basalt? Is that what I'm hearing?
take it back and they cut it up in slabs and make countertops for people. So people can say, my countertop came from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And it's just unbelievably expensive, because it'd be expensive to get it. And it was pretty, but it wasn't, wasn't that pretty. Okay, I wouldn't go to the bottom of the Pacific to get any, that's for sure.
Yeah, me neither, Kent. But that doesn't mean anything. Okay, my unfinished journey for $6.66 says, "Hail Nero, hail Daps and Bent, and hail that famous erogenous zone of the Himalayas." That is not the same kind of... It's not erogeny, it's orogeny with an O, but thank you. And then Goop3 for $2 says, AIG is a collection of rocks. Yeah, well, whatever. We'll take a drink for it. I don't even care. Alright, and then let me update the number correctly this time. Thank you very much.
But he gave me this piece of it. It's probably still, I left all that stuff in my science class when I left out there. But they wanted to have the rock on the bottom of the Pacific. In order to get to it, they had to blow the dust out of the way. Well, how much mud and dirt and silt is down there?
It probably
when
varies.
they calculate how much silt is in the ocean compared to how fast it's coming in, all you got to do is run the numbers and you'll find out it's only a few thousand years worth of mud in the ocean.
Hey, Ben, what was that word starting with an S that he was just talking about earlier?
Subduction?
Yeah. You think subduction might, I don't know, remove sediment from the ocean and then melt it, turning it into that lava that he was talking about earlier?
No, that's obviously impossible.
Yeah, obvious. It's like, Ken, you were just talking about the very solution to this problem. What? Taking a drink. Or mud apparently has no way to leave the ocean. It's just impossible.
Our little pond gradually gets mud and leaves in it, right?
Yeah, sure.
When you went in there to clean it out last time, first time it had been cleaned out in probably a year and a half since we built it, it was, quarter inch of mud in there. Let's just assume it gets a quarter inch of mud every year. The pond's only 2 feet deep. Eventually, if we did nothing, it would fill in with mud. Just that's the way it happens, okay? Eventually, the oceans are going to fill in with sediment.
No, Kent, they won't. Because over long time scales, the ocean floor is recycled into the mantle, which removes that sediment. And new ocean floor is opened up. And you know this, Kent, that new ocean floor is created. And do you know how I know that he knows this? Because he was just talking about seafloor spreading, which is the creation of new ocean floor. And on the opposite side, over in the Pacific, that results in subduction, which is the destruction of old ocean floor. So no, that's not how it works. Now, granted, at any given time, the rate of sediment entering versus leaving the ocean probably not going to be in equilibrium over the course of a few years, right? So it might be that for a few centuries, more sediment is washing in than is being removed, and then for another few centuries or millennia or whatever, more sediment is being removed than washed in. So it doesn't have to be an equilibrium every single moment, but it's going to be an approximate equilibrium over the history of the planet Earth.
So how much is there? Well, they find out there's only a few thousand years worth of accumulation. Well, those who teach the Earth is billions of years old don't like that idea because, they know the Earth is billions of years old. So why is there only a few thousand years worth of mud in the ocean?
Well, first, I need a better citation than, like, your student's dad from, like, 30 years ago to say that there's only a few thousand years worth of sediment. Because estimates I've heard put it, several orders of magnitude higher than that, like, hundreds of thousands to low millions. But also, yeah, sediment leaves the ocean. That's it. That's the whole explanation. Sediment leaves the ocean.
What's their answer going to be?
Their answer is going to be, it is about time for a quick break, because it is just past the hour. So let's reconvene here in just a minute. I will first play the teaser for this Friday's episode of Star Trek Lexington, my Star Trek Adventures actual play, featuring people you might be familiar with, like Chesh and FTFE and Jordan from Reason to Doubt, as well as some of my viewers like Zerolon, Necro, and Tiri Rana. So enjoy that. I will get myself a fresh drink, and we will be back just a little bit. Next time on Star Trek Lexington.
Captain's Log, Stardate 6025.8. Starfleet has ordered us to the star system J05 plus 833 to investigate a series of incidents occurring around an alien artifact named the Big Dipper. Reports indicate damage from weapons fire, and the Science Council is concerned that the Klingons may be attacking the artifact to deny the Federation the resources it generates.
All is not well at Purgatory, a hot Jupiter orbiting a Class F star. The planet has an unusually rich layer of heavy elements and dilithium below the outer clouds. The planet is tightly locked to its host star, and orbiting is an alien megastructure. The megastructure is a skyhook, a device that uses counterweights to bring matter from deep in a gravity well into orbit with relatively little energy. 2 ram scoops are mounted on the end of tethers that are some 15,000 kilometers long, and are used to gather valuable minerals from the planet. The ram scoops keep being damaged, and they bear the signs of weapons fire. No ships other than Starfleet vessels have been detected coming into or out of the system, and the intense radiation and thick clouds of Purgatory hinder scans of the planet's depths. Could Romulans or Klingons be attacking the megastructure without being detected? Or is there something else going on? With solar radiation 290 times higher than experienced in Earth orbit, temperatures soaring into the thousands Kelvin, and a running clock, can the crew of the Lexington uncover the truth before the ancient alien megastructure and valuable Federation asset is damaged beyond repair? Will what they discover spark an interstellar war? What, if anything, lurks below the clouds of Purgatory? One thing is for certain. There is mystery and danger to come in Drawing Deeply from the Well, only on the Top Hats Off channel. Okay, we are back. Sorry for that mix up with the video and the audio there. So that's a Dapper's a Professional. Take a drink for that. My Unfinished Socks for $2 says, clean sediment from your socks, then like and share. Agreed. Then Savage Cobra for $9.99 says, my father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate said there's millions of years of benthic sediment. Well, what did that make us? Ben, you gotta finish the line.
Absolutely nothing.
There you
Which is
go.
what you're about to be.
Very, very good. All right. So, now we're back real quick. I do want to say thank you so much for all your generosity, all your support. It really does mean a lot. Look, doing YouTube is precarious, right? And anytime y'all could just walk away from me and I would just be broke. I mean, I'd have a few months to try to, like, find something else. But by and large, I'd be in a lot of trouble. And you haven't done that. You've been sticking with me. In fact, the channel has been growing. It's been getting easier and easier to make the budget work. And I really appreciate that. And that is because of your generosity. And so if you're someone who is not currently helping the channel stay afloat financially, but you're interested in doing so, there are some great ways to do that. But the first thing I want to say is that don't do this if you can't afford it. If you cannot afford to support my channel financially, do not do that. You should have things like family stuff, groceries, bills, all that should be higher priority than this. My channel is a discretionary entertainment expense. Should not come out of their budget for anything else. But assuming that you do have some extra money lying around, and that you do think that you'll support what the channel does in trying to increase scientific literacy, debunk pseudoscience, things like that, because I don't know if you know, but pseudoscience is on the rise. A very likely potential pick for the next person in charge of, like, health in general in the United States is a COVID denier with the brainworm who thinks that vaccines are bad, which, doesn't bode well. So if you would like to help support me in my small little fight against pseudoscience and whatnot, there's a number of great ways to do that. Best one is the Patreon. Next best is probably the channel memberships. Those are both monthly normally. You can also go annual for a 15% discount over on Patreon. I get to keep the most on Patreon. Either way, you get access to my scripted videos early. I just finished the script for another one today, which will be the second one I'll probably finish this month. We're months ahead on scripted videos. So, I mean, the video that I make this week and finish this week probably won't air until, like, May or June of 2025. No, that's probably too much. Maybe April or May of 2025. So, like, there's a lot of stuff to watch. You can also get higher perks at higher tiers. The Patreon starts at $1 a month. You can go all the way up to $100. The channel memberships start at $1.99. They can go all the way up to $20. Channel memberships also get you the cool badge next to your name, the green name, and channel emojis. So, there's that. But if monthly or annual isn't your thing, there's a merch store linked in the description. And it's also below this video. There's also an Amazon wishlist for both me and Bent. Bent also has a Patreon link listed in the description. And yeah, we both also have wish lists from Amazon that don't necessarily help the channel keep afloat, but they help give me the happy brain chemicals, which is important because burnout is a thing. And I've been avoiding it for years now. And part of that is that every once in a while, someone sends me something nice. And I appreciate that. Apocalypse Meow for $4.99 says, for the budget. Thank you very much. It does, in fact, help the budget. So I do greatly appreciate that. All right, but we are not currently on pace to get Bent a free pizza. We would need to get this all the way up to 100%. We're only at 30%. So, I don't know, Bent, you might starve tonight.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it turns out the only time Bent eats is when I get him a free pizza that you guys pay for.
Yeah, I'm very hungry.
Yeah. Bent is constantly just inches away from starving to death. It's only you who can save him. These are definitely true things, and I am not being facetious at all. I mean, look at Bent. He looks like he's on death's door already. Look at those sunken eyes, the sunken cheeks. Got no flesh. Just skin and bones.
Exactly.
All right, here we go.
They've got an answer for that. No, they're saying the whole ocean floor is being pulled under at the edge and coming up new stuff in the middle.
Yeah, because we can verifiably measure that. And also, Kent, if the Atlantic is growing, which you think it is, that means the Pacific is shrinking. Where's the extra crust going, according to you? Do you think, like, what could possibly be happening to it, Kent? It has to go somewhere. There aren't just a whole bunch of folded mountains all around the Pacific. Instead, there's this thing we call the Ring of Fire. Josh McGee's for $5 says, not the gruel. No, I don't get Bent gruel. He gets pizza and nothing else. I mean, if he's sneaking my flour to make his own gruel, then we need to have a discussion about how he's not supposed to be stealing my flour.
It wasn't me. It was the dog.
The dog snuck my flour in to make herself gruel.
Yep, that's what happened.
I find that very hard to believe, since none of the dogs can reach the flour or the stove.
But it happened.
One of them can't even walk. She's paralyzed.
She can walk with her front legs.
That's not going to help her get gruel made.
It'll help a little bit.
No, it won't. It's completely impossible. Even a wheelchair, she can't make it.
She can't even get around in the kitchen.
Oh yeah, she's stuck in that one room because there's carpet, which is just enough friction to let her pull herself around.
Exactly.
There you go. Donate to get a better wheelchair. Probably don't do that. I'm probably not going to. Her wheelchair is fine. Except for the missing pin.
Yeah, we took care of that, though.
Okay.
Just like a conveyor belt, it takes all the sediments down in, remelts them, comes back up, and so the ocean floor is constantly cleansing itself.
Yep. Do you have anything to counter this, Kent, besides nuh-uh?
That's why there's no mud down there.
Well, no, it's why there's not billions of years worth, Kent. Not none, just not billions of years worth.
Okay, I suppose that's a possibility.
Joshua Yeats for $5 says, every time I hear Ring of Fire, I think of Johnny Cash. Well, I mean, yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? My Unfinished Sock for $2 says, please, sir, can I have some more socks? Yeah, you can have as many as you would like. As long as they all like this video.
But there's another possibility why there's only a few thousand years worth of mud down there. What would that possibility be? It's only a few thousand years old, that's right.
Yeah, except it's not just a few thousand. It's like tens to hundreds of thousands. Which even ICR admitted in some videos that actually came out publicly not that long ago, where they tackled this very claim. And yeah, so there's that. And also, like, are you just denying subduction? Because that's going to be a pretty big stretch. And again, yeah, all he basically had was nuh-uh. So I'm going to count that as a confirmed prediction and take a drink. Happy Puppy 6666 says, what are you drinking? Can you text Kent Hovind? Or can you text Kent Hovind? I am drinking cucumber gin and tonic, and I don't know if Kent gets texts. But I do have his number, because everyone does. It's 855 Big Dino. But yeah, I don't think that number gets text. Because I'm pretty sure that that just goes to the phone system at Dinosaur Adventureland. Because from there, you can enter different extensions to get different people. And actually, the last time I called it was after Kent got bit by that rattlesnake, because I was trying to do some investigative journalism of my own to try to figure out what the heck had actually happened, and whether or not the snake was okay. Because, I mean, let's be honest, I care much more about that snake than I do about Kent Hovind. Turns out Kent murdered the snake, in case you're wondering. And yeah, he was okay. Which is what I learned when I called his number. I also recently called the Creation Museum, see if they still had that mechanical raptor, animatronic raptor on display. Even though they now say that that animal is actually a feathery bird, it's not a dinosaur at all. The answer is yes, they do still have that on display. So, that's weird.
That was a flood 4,400 years ago, just like the Bible says, and Maybe that's why there's not much mud down there.
Imagine thinking that a worldwide flood will result in not much mud at the bottom of the ocean. The thing that would create more mud that is even reasonable. But yeah, no, that's not going to cause much mud. Like, you were using current non-worldwide flood erosion rates and sedimentation rates to try to figure out how much time it would take to accumulate the current amount of sediment in the ocean. And you came out with a few thousand years. You don't think that a worldwide flood would produce more than that in just the 1 year? What? I'm taking a drink. And if the consensus one was there's like 8 million years worth of mud down there, he would just say, well, yeah, that's because of the flood. It washed a whole bunch of mud into there, so obviously. It's just so transparent that he has no actual ability to reason about this, and he will just take anything and twist it however he can to make it kind of seem like that's support for them. It's almost impressive, the degree to which this guy is intellectually dishonest. And Vadim Redchenko says, hey, mechanical raptors ain't cheap. Yeah, but, I mean, let's face it. Answers in Genesis can get together millions of dollars when they want to. They could afford to replace that raptor.
But all the textbooks teach the continents are moving, and they say they're moving about as fast as your fingernails grow.
Mm-hmm.
Fingernails grow a little faster than toenails. I think it grows.
Is that actually true? I've never heard that. It sounds like it's not true, but I can't actually demonstrate it. I don't know. If anyone can find out whether or not that's true, let me know.
Goes from where it comes out to the end, which is called the cutting length. I used to know the numbers for biology class. I think it's like 130 days or something like that. 3 months or 4 months it takes to get from here to here.
Wouldn't that depend on how big your fingernails are?
Yeah, it might be an average.
Okay.
If it takes 4 months to grow a ½ inch, or say it grows an inch a year, to pick a number, okay?
Sure.
If the continents are moving an inch a year, it's going to be pretty hard to notice.
Fearmong Group says that they believe that that's actually true. But is that just something that you happen to think is true? Like, is there a source on this?
To try to figure out if indeed they are moving, when this theory came out about the continental drift, one thing they came up with was, they said, let's put a satellite up in what's called parking orbit, and we'll bounce lasers off it from America.
Is that just geostationary orbit?
And from Europe. We'll both bounce lasers off this satellite, and we'll check the angle of our laser beam. If the angle is getting wider, then we're drifting apart. If the angle is getting tighter, we're drifting together. Sounds good. Problem is, as the laser goes through the atmosphere, it distorts it. If you ever look through hot air, like just above the surface of a hot blacktop, you see kind of the wavy lines, That's called atmospheric distortion.
Mm-hmm.
That's what causes a mirage.
Hey, Bent, have you heard of those telescopes that shoot lasers in addition to collecting light?
Mm-hmm. To compensate?
Yeah, so can you use a laser to actually compensate for atmospheric distortion?
I'm pretty sure you can.
Right, because otherwise how would those telescopes work, right?
Right.
So, do you think that people would use the same techniques to factor out the atmospheric distortion, and then over a long enough period of time, and factoring that out consistently enough, actually arrive at real data?
No one's ever thought of that before.
No, okay, that's sorry, I should have realized.
They only
that.
think of that in other examples, but not this one, obviously.
Oh, hey, Fearmonger has a scientific paper on the growth of fingernails versus toenails. Growth rate of human fingernails and toenails in healthy American young adults. Okay. Average fingernail growth rate was faster than that of toenails, 3.47 versus 1.62 millimeters per month. Okay, there was no significant difference between right and left toenail growth rates. Little finger grew slower than other fingernails. Great toenail grew faster than other toenails. Younger age, male gender, and onychophagia were associated with faster nail growth rate. However, the differences were not statistically significant. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I'm probably not going to go through and read that entire paper, but it's interesting that there were results that indicated that fingernails grow faster than toenails. So, and significantly faster. Okay. I guess I do have to clip my fingernails more often than my finger claws more often than my toe. So I guess it kind of. But then again, I don't know if that works because I'm not a human. I'm not going to worry about it.
Well, the laser going through the atmosphere is going to cause it to go off, bounce around.
Yes, in measurable ways that can then be compensated for, Kent.
And go off course a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Once it gets out of the atmosphere, hits the satellite, comes back, and goes back through the atmosphere.
Why does it go back through the atmosphere? Who cares? You're measuring it at the satellite.
How is it hitting the satellite if it's being distorted and changing directions?
Yeah, if it's precise enough to hit
way.
the satellite, you would think there must not be very much distance that it's moving.
Must be a huge satellite.
Ugh, this is very, very silly. I'm taking a drink. Like, Kent starts out with a description of an experiment that kind of makes sense, but then his objections to it just become more and more absurd as he explains them.
Just the atmospheric distortion of the laser is going to be a certain amount. Get this on the chalkboard here, can I do? A circle is divided up into angles.
And yeah, Falcon says, Kent is using a term that refers to an intermediate orbit, not a type of orbit that are the final destination. Yeah, parking orbit normally means basically once you get something into low Earth orbit and you're waiting for it to have an opportune moment to get into its final orbit. And in the meantime, you're just in that parking orbit. So I suspect what he actually meant was a geostationary orbit, which is an orbit that is at an altitude such the orbital period is equal to the rotational period of the Earth. That is 24 hours. Well, whatever a sidereal day is, so it's slightly less than 24 hours. In which case, you stay steady above that fixed point on Earth. And it has to be around the equator. You can have a geosynchronous orbit, which has the same period but is inclined to the equator, in which case you will face, if you were like observing from the ground, it would be like you were moving in a line north to south. If your orbit isn't very, very circular, you might be doing a figure 8, but you're still keeping an orbital period that's the same as the Earth's rotation in a synchronous orbit. So, and that's the kind of orbit you want if you want to do measurements from fixed positions on the ground versus a fixed position in space. Geosynchronous orbit. Otherwise, the angles will vary as your orbit changes, and also you might, if it's not a synchronous orbit, you might actually go out of range of you will go out of range of the laser, because you will eventually just be on the opposite side of the planet.
Now, degrees. 360 degrees in a circle. Each degree, then, is further divided into minutes.
Hey, he's getting this right. Take a drink.
60 minutes in a degree. Each of those minutes would be divided up into what? Seconds.
Yep.
How many seconds would you think are in a minute? 60. Very good. Okay. Just the atmospheric distortion, just going through the 100 miles of air, causes 0.046 arc seconds of distortion. So the laser is going to be off. So here they are trying to figure out if the continents are moving by bouncing lasers off a satellite. And just the distortion is going to cause them to lose some of the accuracy.
You know, Ken should write this up and submit a critique to a scientific journal, because if he's right that all of these scientists who've dedicated their entire lives to doing this kind of thing have just kind of forgotten about atmospheric distortion, he could show that their papers are worthless. He'd become famous. Now, Kent gave this talk about 20-ish years ago. Maybe a little bit longer. As far as I know, he hasn't written that paper. Now, it could just be that he's lazy and he can't write, which we do know is true. But also I feel like if he were right, maybe he could have informed, say, I don't know, any of the young earthers who were doing astronomy nonsense, like, what's that one guy? He wrote a book about how the Earth is a sphere and not it was a globe and not flat. He works for Answers in Genesis. Now I can't remember his name. Whatever. Faulkner, Danny Faulkner. They just sent this to Danny Faulkner and said, "Hey, Danny, why don't you publish about this?" No, Hasn't happened either. So what Kent is trying to tell you here is that this guy, who doesn't even know what subduction is, even though his own model of the Earth requires it to be a thing, this guy who thinks that each individual base pair is not one, but two different genes, one from your mom and one from your dad, because that's apparently how sexual reproduction works. That guy has figured out the one flaw with all of these laser studies that no one else has ever figured out. They didn't think about it. He did, though. Now, I will let you come to your own conclusion as to what seems more likely. That Kent, one of the most colossal idiots to have ever lived in the history of the universe, has figured out something that every expert for decades has just kind of not noticed, even though it's glaringly obvious. It's one option. Or maybe they have figured that out, and they've corrected for it, as astronomers have been doing for a while now. And Kent's just as stupid as he appears about this. Or, sorry, he's just as stupid as he appears about everything else, about this in particular. Those are the options before you, my dear audience. I will let you draw the conclusion. I think you can probably figure out what my conclusion on that is.
0.046 arc seconds. After the satellite was up there for like 8 years, it finally, you can't keep them up there forever. It fell out of orbit, okay? They noticed they had seen about 3 inches. I'm sorry, they had seen no movement at all in 8 years. But because of that 0.046 arc seconds, it could have moved about 3...
I'm going to need to see a citation for any of this, Kent. Because, frankly, I can't believe Kent when he says things like, well, they got 0 results for 8 years. I don't believe you. Right? I don't, because here's the thing, Kent. You yourself think that the seafloor is spreading at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. How could that happen and not push North America and Europe farther away from each other? Like, how could it possibly happen? Like, think about this, right? Imagine you have 2 pieces of paper, and on each piece of paper you put a coin. And then you start moving the pieces of paper away from each other. What's going to happen to the distance between the coins? Ben, do you want to take a wild stab as to what might happen?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Let's say you had 2 pieces of paper, and you put a coin on each one, and the pieces of paper start touching each other. But then you start to slowly move them away.
Right.
The distance between the coins is going to do what?
It's going to increase.
Yeah. So how could this be happening under the ocean and having Europe and North America not move apart? What does Kent think seafloor spreading does? Like, physically. The continents are connected to the ocean floor in the Atlantic. If it's spreading, they have to be moving apart on their east coasts and moving together, well, Eurasia and North America on their west coasts. Like, there's no other option. I'm taking a drink as to how insanely stupid this is. Because, yeah, even if Kent is right and all the experts are wrong, and their measurements are dumb and stupid and lame, the continents still have to be moving away from each other.
3 inches, and they would not have noticed. Instruments weren't that accurate. So they said, well, it probably did move 3 inches in 8 years then.
Who said that, Kent? Where? You have cited things before. Cite this study. But no. You know why? Because he's probably just making it up, or slightly more likely, he's getting it from some other creationist who just made it up. Because here's the thing about creationists. They love to just make things up.
They didn't observe it, they assumed it. And it could have, I don't know. It wouldn't matter to me if it did. But if the continents did move 3 inches in 8 years, what does that prove?
That they're moving.
Here's their logic, okay? Okay. How far is it from New York to Portugal? Wow. From New York to the Azores is 2,600 miles.
Oh, hey, it's
about 3,500 miles. Okay, 3,500 miles across the Atlantic. It's moving 3 inches in 8 years. How many years would that be to spread them apart?
Well, that was a annoying thing that just happened. We'll see if we can recover this.
Bumper moves in toward the windshield. The metal has to wrinkle up to absorb all of that. And a good engineer will take advantage of that. Okay, the metal's going to wrinkle up. Let's use the brake. Has a long ways to fall down there. In certain places. So at the mid-Atlantic ridge, it's coming up and moving out, and then it's going being areas of subduction where one is sliding under another. Bottom of the Pacific to get any, that's for sure. But he gave me this. They're saying the whole ocean floor is being pulled under out about the continental drift. One thing they came up with was, they said, let's put a satellite. Just the atmospheric distance, it wouldn't matter to me if it did. But if the continents did move 3 inches in 8 years, what does that prove? Here's their logic, okay?
Okay, Kent, if this is something that is makes less sense than we can take 150 years worth of data about the magnetic field strength of the Earth and extrapolate that indefinitely into the past. If it's something that is not at least that stupid, taking a drink. Okay.
How far is it from New York to Portugal? Wow. From New York to the Azores is 2,600 miles. About 3,500 miles. Okay, 3,500 miles across the Atlantic. It's moving 3 inches in 8 years. How many years would that be to spread them apart?
It is as dumb, and it is not what they do. Let's take a drink. That is not how this works, because everyone knows who is involved in this, that in fact, the rate at which continents can move varies. It is not a constant thing. Sometimes things happen rapidly, sometimes things happen slowly. We can see this with the Indian subcontinent, which basically raced north from Antarctica to slam into Eurasia in a very short period of time, geologically speaking. Whereas other geological movements, like the spreading of the Atlantic, happen much, much more slowly. So there's no one uniform rate at which these things happen, and they can vary over time for the same plates. Instead, what we do is we do take into account what are realistic travel time, based on calculated rates that are as well as calculated maximum and minimum rates for how fast do we think it's reasonable that they could move based on what we know of physics. And then also, there are other things, like we cross-check this with radiometric dating. Like, hey, these rocks are both volcanic or igneous in origin, and they cross 2 continents, which means that when they were laid down, the continents had to be together. Which means if we date them, then we now have a bracket for, we know that they were together at this time, which means that they must have spread apart after this. And when you stop seeing continuous sediment, which you can, or rocks in general, which you can date with things like radiometric dating and things like that, that's when you can assign an age. It's not just a simple, let's extend this process back into the past, which, let's remember, according to Kent, is a perfectly valid thing to do. Because Kent did that with both the sedimentation in the ocean, which we know is not constant, and with the magnetic, the current decay in the field strength of the dipole elements of Earth's magnetic field. Both of which he just assumed you can just extend those rates indefinitely into the past to come up with numbers. But now, in a case where scientists aren't even doing that, but Kent thinks they are, that's not appropriate. Kent, the call is coming from inside the house on this one.
Millions and millions of years. And their math is right. It's their logic that's wrong.
Oh, if there has ever been a video of Kent's that has better epitomized the calling the kettle black, I don't know which one it would be. And I've seen a lot of Kent Hovind videos. It is amazing that he will try to call out scientists for something they're not even doing. That's exactly what he was doing twice earlier in this very talk. This man has a level of self-awareness that I would expect from moldy cheese. It is amazing the degree to which Kent has zero ability to reflect upon himself. Just none. And look how smug he looks in this. Like, they think they can just extend current processes indefinitely back into the past. How silly of them.
He's very happy with himself.
He really... I'm taking a drink for this. I just can't. It's absolutely amazing. Okay, well, we're going to hit play.
Okay, maybe the continents are moving. I don't know. Wouldn't matter to me if they are.
Kent, you do know, because you accept processes that of necessity result in them moving. You can't accept seafloor spreading in the Atlantic and then just pretend that that doesn't result in the continents moving. How would that work, Kent? Where does the extra crust go if it's not into moving the continents apart? Do you think there are mountains that are just building up, like halfway between the mid-Atlantic ridge and either side of the continents? Do you think there's like a quarter and 3/4 Atlantic mountain chains that just haven't breached the surface yet? What do you think is actually happening?
If they're moving 3 inches every 8 years,
Sure.
we don't know that they are, but if they are,
I mean, we do know that they're moving at about that rate, but okay.
would that mean you would measure from New York to Portugal to find out? I mean, if you took the water out of the Atlantic Ocean, you would notice there's dirt underneath.
Hey,
Is all of the ocean floor recycled from the mid-Atlantic ridge?
no, Kent. It's just that's what's currently happening right now. In the past, there were other places where the seafloor was spreading. Like, when Pangaea came together, the Atlantic was growing at that time. And sorry, the Pacific was growing at that time. And so the crust between what's now North America and Eurasia and South America and Africa, that was subducting. And it's all gone now. And it was being recycled on the other side of the world. But now that the opposite is happening, a lot of new crust is forming in the Atlantic, and a lot of old crust is going away in the Pacific. But that will change again. That also won't be forever.
Well, the plates are moving, but that does not prove they've always been moving. It does.
Do you have a mechanism that would have started this up at some point in the past, Kent? The apparently recent past, Kent? I mean, I know he's just going to say, well, hydroplate theory, except hydroplate theory is physically impossible and would not just melt the crust of the Earth, but turn it into a ball of plasma. Like, I need to be clear. The amount of energy that is involved in hydroplate theory is more than catastrophic plate tectonics, which is already enough to vaporize the planet. It's around the same level as the gravitational binding energy of the planet, which is basically how much energy you would have to put into the planet to make it turn into Alderaan after the Death Star. So,
That's a lot of energy.
Yeah, and catastrophic plate tectonics is worse. So, no. Space Dragon says, I'm pretty sure there are other areas of the ocean where the crust is spreading. That's true. Some areas in the Pacific and the Indian Oceans, notably, the Pacific just has subduction on both sides. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm simplifying this down to, like, the two main locations for new seafloor and subduction. At a broad enough level, it is basically true that new crust is forming in the Atlantic and the Pacific is subducting. There are obviously places where that general rule is violated. So, yeah, it is true that there are places all over the place where there's subduction and new crust forming in ways that buck the overall trend on a planet-wide scale.
Doesn't prove the rate's always been the same.
Kent, are you saying that measurements of current processes can't necessarily be extended indefinitely back into the past because the rate of change might not be constant? Is that what you're saying, Kent?
Busted.
Taking a drink. I just can't with this guy. Because on the one hand, yeah, Kent, that's true. They can change. Huh. I wonder if that has anything to say about your whole, like, magnetic field strength decay, or your whole, like, there's too much, or there's not enough sediment in the ocean idea. I wonder.
And students ought to be told there are other options to explain this. For instance, here we are in Pensacola, Florida. Interstate 10 runs from Los Angeles to Jacksonville.
That sounds right. I haven't driven all of I-10. I have driven all of I-90. Like from Seattle to Boston. It's a long drive.
I've driven on every inch of Interstate 10. It is a long road.
Mm-hmm. That's true. We'll take it.
If I go up here to the interstate and see somebody headed east at 70 miles an hour, first place, if he's going 70, he's going to get run over, right? From behind.
It depends on which part of I-70, or sorry, I-10 you're on, but some places.
That's right. Good, Eric. Does that prove he started in Los Angeles 4 days ago?
No, Kent, because rates are variable. Something you earlier in this video forgot about.
No, he might have just got on at the last exit, right? If we see the continents are moving, does that prove they've been moving for millions of years?
No, but the fact that we can radiometrically date rocks from before the continents split apart at hundreds of millions of years old, and that we have evidence of the continents shifting in things like paleolatitude, how high north or south they are, we do know that it has been going on for millions of years. And since we have their current position, and we have a range of possible dates for when they were together, we can combine that to say that they've been moving for those millions of years, because we have direct evidence of it. Can we always say the exact rate at which they did so? No, because our data isn't that granular. But can we give an average rate over several millions of years? Yeah, absolutely.
No. They might have started moving at the flood.
Okay, cool. Now all you have to do is actually provide evidence that there ever was a flood. Which, good luck, because basically every single thing about the physical universe, well, the physical world on Earth, precludes the flood from ever having existed. There are no physically plausible or even possible flood models that have been proposed. None. I need to hammer that home, right? Every single proposed flood mechanism that results in a flood that even vaguely resembles the Genesis flood, if taken literally, involves multiple physical impossibilities. Which means none of them are viable models of the past. All of them are impossible. They cannot happen as described in the models. All of them. And Kent has picked one of the worst of those to hang his hat on. So I don't really care that much about his little objections to like, well, maybe the continental drift rate was different in the past. Yeah, it probably was, Kent. Which, one, is something you ignore in your own examples, and two, doesn't even come close to the problems that you have with your own model, which is physically impossible.
The fountains of the deep broke open, continents slide away, gradually slow down, and we're still today seeing the slowing down. The Earth is still getting adjusted.
But Kent, that would not explain things like our paleolatitude data, which we can use to reconstruct how far north or south a part of the Earth's crust was in the ancient past. And we know that it has varied. For instance, at some point, this area that I'm in now, in Arizona, used to be basically smack on the equator. It isn't anymore. Similarly, Antarctica at one point was almost smack on the equator. It certainly isn't that anymore. But when it was, it had things like lush jungles and swamps, where weird things like amphibians the size of crocodiles could live. Put any amphibian in Antarctica now, see how long it lives. Not going to live long enough to grow to be crocodile size, I promise that.
It hit pretty hard 4,400 years ago. Had a rough life. Things are still settling in, still moving once in a while, still have an earthquake once in a while. It's all still settling from the flood. That is, I think, just as reasonable of a theory.
Yeah, as long as you ignore all the multiple physical impossibilities, I'm taking a drink. Here are some alternate models, one of which involves my interpretation of my favorite book being wrong. The other of which involves more physical impossibilities than anyone could reasonably list in a single sitting. Which of those things do you think is more likely? The one where maybe I'm wrong about my favorite book? Or the one that's physically impossible for more ways than anyone can even name? I don't know about you, but I have less confidence in Kent's ability to interpret his favorite book, as well as the reliability of Kent's favorite book about, like, you know, ancient history, than I do in, say, physics. Maybe I'm wrong to think that way. But, no, I definitely have more confidence in physics than Kent Hovind's personal interpretation of Iron Age takes on Bronze Age story. Sorry.
Next week, when we come back, we'll take up with more on the continental drift and on the flood.
Oh, good.
And next week, we'll start our CSE 104. So if you know anybody who wants to come join the class, tell them to come on. We're doing it, getting it on tape. We have about 200 students, I think, now total, don't we, Becky? And all the
200? No. Imagine 200 people thinking it was a good idea to take this course. Ugh. That honestly makes me really sad. Like, so much nonsense in such a concentrated form. Hundreds of people are like, yeah, sign me up. Oh, that makes me sad.
classes in CSE 101 and 102. And, yep. So hopefully it's been a blessing. And
No, it's been more of a curse, Kent. It's been more of a curse. I feel like I now need some more, like, Patropaic amulets or something. Maybe that's what I'm going to do with some free time, is make some Patropaic amulets. If anyone has any recommendations for their favorite Patropaic items, let me know. I'm thinking, like, amulets, bowls, rolled up lead scrolls. Yeah, I don't know. Rings, maybe? I don't know. Are there Patropaic rings maybe I could get to get less cursed? Let me know. If you don't know what a Patropaic means, that is your homework for the night. So, Bent, you don't know what a Patropaic means?
No, and I'm not doing my homework.
Oh, I will flunk you.
Then I fail.
You're gonna flunk Dapper Dino 101.
So be it.
All right, we're gonna call it Dapper Dino Evangelism 101. It'll be great. It'll certainly be smarter than whatever it is Kent is doing. It's also going to just involve all, like, the weird references I make. So there's going to be, like, stuff like ancient history, horror movies, sci-fi movies, horror sci-fi.
We'll get back to Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm sure Star Trek will be in there. Like Dapper Dino 102 is just going to be like 2 semesters worth of Klingon education. How to speak Klingon, how to write Klingon, Klingon grammar, Klingon literature. Yep. We're going to read through Chapmonme, which is, as far as I know, the only novel composed in Klingon in real life. So, yeah, it's on my wish list. So if anyone wants to get me Chapmonme, totally can. I have no idea if it's good, but it is a novel, and it isn't composed in Klingon. Bitcourse, who's been a member for 12 months, says, this video is a whole AIG with a Mopra. Yeah, no. Agreed. We'll take a drink for that. All right, let's get a little bit more Kent in. He's got like 10 seconds left, so.
more on that next week. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kent. I don't even know. Like, it's not actually a thing. It's terrible. But, hey, we've only got about 11 minutes left worth of show, which means we're probably not going to... Yeah, we're not going to start the next one. CSE 103, Class 10, I guess. I'll look into it. We'll see how it is. It's possible that it will just be a bunch of Kent conspiracy theories, in which case we will not be watching it. Because, quite frankly, I don't care to have Kent drone on at me about, like, the globalists. Which, by the way, is usually just code for the Jews. So yeah, I don't want to sit through that. So yeah, I will double check his CSE 103 Class 10. And if it is, as he said, more about hydroplate and geology and plate tectonics, then yeah, we'll cover that. So there we go. Space Dragon says, finish with 7 times bingo. Oof. Yeah. These always get you a bingo. So Debate Hub says you should totally go over the new video drop over on my channel. Unfortunately, I have not got around to watching the new video drop, but I will say Debate Hub is in fact Chesh, and so there you go. And if you want, Chesh has been running a bit of a variety channel for a while, right? And one of the problems with a variety channel is that it's really hard to grow a variety channel because people show up for one thing, then they get other videos that aren't that thing, and they wander away. And then YouTube sees that as, well, they don't want to watch any of this channel's content. So then they are less likely to send you notifications for that channel. That channel stuff is less likely to show up in your feed unless you specifically go to your subscriptions feed, stuff like that. So Chesh has decided to basically create a new channel that has a lot more of her like philosophy and debate oriented stuff called Debate Hub. So if you are interested in that side of her channel, you should go over there because that's where that stuff is going to be. And so yeah, if anyone wants to drop the link to Debate Hub in the chat, so like, you know, moderators, please do that because Chesh has some good stuff. She's got conversations with philosophers on there right now, posting debates, hopefully, stuff like that. Yeah, check that out. So Bent, do you have anything you want to announce to people before we get out of here?
I don't think so.
No?
Should I?
I mean, yeah, you should start doing stuff on your channel.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe not.
You should just start uploading music to your channel.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe not.
All right, fine. Don't do it then. All right, so what's coming up on this channel? Let's take a look before we get out of here. On Thursday, we've got Greg Kukul Butts In. Frank Turk is Clueless Part 3. That is on the 14th. That is scheduled for 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Do remember, it is no longer daylight savings time, so your clocks have changed. Mine have not. Then, on Friday, over on Top Hats Off, my second channel, we are doing episode 7, I believe, of Star Trek Lexington, drawing deeply from the well, in which this crew of the Starship Lexington will encounter an ancient skyhook that Starfleet is studying and utilizing for its resource extraction. However, it keeps being damaged, and no one is sure why. The leader of the Starfleet crew that is manning the skyhook thinks it might be the Klingons, so the Lexington is going to investigate that possibility. So that will be at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern over on Top Hats Off, and again, that will feature myself, Tiri Rana, Zeralon, Zarnikar or Necro, depending on which place he's in, Chesh, Craig from FTFE, and Jordan from Reason to Doubt. Pretty big crew. We have a lot of fun with that. So please do check that out. It's usually somewhere between like 2 and 4 hours, but usually closer to 2. So that's on Friday. Then on Saturday, we will be doing another Kent with Bent. Not Kent with Bent, I'm sorry. Dapper Reacts. Not Kent with Bent. Don't worry, Bent. We're not doing a Saturday show.
Okay, I won't worry.
Okay. That one will hopefully be involving Dr. Kip Davis, because it will involve what does Genesis 1:1 actually say? And could you just take the text of Genesis 1, or well, not just 1:1, sorry, just Genesis 1 generally. Could you take the text of Genesis 1 and come up with anything like modern cosmology just on the basis of Genesis 1? Here's a spoiler. The answer is no, but we're going to actually get into that. So that's Saturday. That should be at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And then next Tuesday should be Matt with Maddie. I just had to double check with Maddie and make sure that she's good. And yeah, that is the plan going forward for just over a week. If you are wondering, the plan is to in fact watch 4 more episodes of Power Rangers RPM over in the Discord if you're interested in that and you have access to the Discord. So I will hopefully see all of you on Thursday. And at least some of you can come hang out and watch Power Rangers. 4 episodes. So it'll take about like an hour and a half. So, all right. Well, with that being said, I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay safe out there. And hey, double check medical claims, even if they're coming from the United States government in, say, a few months. Because, yeah, that's important. Anyway, bye, everybody.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Hovind, Thurevara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Elron Teller, Ian Chen, Calvin Brostig von Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, Flawless, Edwin M., North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, and Strawberry Vein. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.